When the HOA bulldozed my disabled mom's wheelchair ramp, they had no idea she was once the most feared civil rights attorney in the state. What happens when they find out who they're really messing with? The smell of fresh sawdust hit me first. Then I saw the stack of splintered wood where Mom's wheelchair ramp once was. My heart stopped. I dropped my grocery bags and ran to our front door, where Mom sat huddled in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face. They took it away. Jordan, she whispered, her voice cracking. I've been cooped up inside all day until Mrs. Patel escorted me to the door. I knelt beside her, my hand trembling with rage. Who did this? Mom indicated a bright pink paper stuck to our door notice of covenant violation. It yelled in bold print below. In smaller print, unauthorized structural modification removed per section. 8.3 of Maple Ridge HOA bylaws. They just can't destroy. Something you require. I reached for my phone to dial the HOA office. Miss Thompson arrived with 3 men in a truck. Mom explained, dabbing her eyes. I pleaded with them to desist, informed them I can't get in or out without it. She smiled and said, rules apply to all. The ramp took me the whole weekend to build Mom's stroke a year ago, left her right side weak, and the 3 steps to our door might as well have been a mountain. The ramp had given her back her freedom. No answer, I growled after the Ho voicemail clicked on, I'm calling the police. The officer who came, Officer Rivera, seemed sympathetic but unhelpful. Sorry, folks, this is a civil matter between you and your homeowners association. Not much we can do. They destroyed our property, I argued, which was technically built on HOA land. He countered, gesturing to the property line. These front yards tend to be common areas and planned communities. Mom said nothing during this encounter, observing with a strange expression in her eyes. Once the officer was gone, our neighbor Mrs. Patel came over with dinner and whispered that Thompson woman is awful. Last month, she finded the Rodriguez family for their son's basketball. Hope I was able to help Mom inside and got her comfortable at the kitchen table. We'll figure something out, I vowed. Perhaps we can seek out proper authorization. Jordan, Mom spoke, reaching for my hand. Something in her voice halted me. Opened my office closet top shelf. There's a blue box with Donovan and Associates on it. I located the dusty box and placed it on the table. Inside were legal pads, business cards, and clippings from the newspaper I'd never seen before. Mom pulled a photograph out of an envelope of a younger version of herself standing on courthouse steps, surrounded by cheering and wheelchairs before my teaching career, before I married your father. She told me I was familiar to my maiden name, Elaine Donovan, co-founding partner of Donovan and Associates. I gazed at the photograph. I don't know. Mom indicated a headline: Civil rights lawyer forces city to retrofit all public buildings for 15 years. I handled ADA compliance cases, she told me, her voice increasing in strength. I sued corporations, government agencies, and yes, homeowners associations who believed disabled individuals didn't deserve equal access. My mouth dropped open. In all my 28 years, I'd only known Mom as an elementary school teacher who made incredible cookies. Why hadn't you ever told me? I closed the practice when I married your father. We wanted a peaceful life. Her eyes snapped shut, but I never lost the ability to fight. Mom pulled a legal pad toward her. Get me my laptop. The Americans with Disabilities Act is pretty definitive on reasonable accommodations, and Janice Thompson just chose the wrong house to bully through the window. I saw Miss Thompson herself striding up our sidewalk. With another notice, I could feel a grin spread wide on my face. The game was going to change. Wait, I said, whipping out my phone. Let me tape this. Mom nodded, a twinkle in her eyes I hadn't seen since before her stroke. As Miss Thompson's knuckles rapped sharply on our door, Mom whispered, "Let the games begin." Miss Thompson's face twitched with irritation. When I opened the door, she was wearing a pressed pantsuit in spite of the summer heat, clipboard clutched to her chest like armor. Another violation notice, she declared, pushing the paper forward. Your garbage can stay in sight from the street for 6 hours yesterday behind me. Mom rolled herself into sight. Miss Thompson. I guess I'm Ela Moore. Your mother needs to realize that rules are meant for everyone, Thompson said to me. Ignoring Mom totally first. The unauthorized ramp, now this 3 violations in a month, invokes automatic fines regarding that ramp. I began blood rushing to my face. Mom touched my arm. We're extremely interested in going the right way. Could you tell us where the bylaw section that addresses accessibility modifications is? Thompson's eyebrows went up a bit. Section 8.3 addresses all structural modifications, no exceptions. In fact, Mom responded calmly. Federal law takes precedence over your covenant. The Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act. Both safeguard my right to reasonable accommodations. For an instant, Thompson appeared taken aback. She recovered herself. You should have filled in a request form, which I will happily do now, Mom replied. Although destroying an existing accommodation prior to approval of alternatives is specifically forbidden under federal guidelines. Thompson's smile grew thin. I'm sure you've been given incorrect information, perhaps in your state. My state? Mom's tone was still even. My state as a disabled person grants me equal access to my home. My status as a past attorney means I know precisely what rights that entails. Thompson's eyes opened slightly past Attorney Donovan, and Associates' mom said, Maybe you've heard of us. The Westridge housing case hit the national news. The color drained from Thompson's face. I struggled to conceal my smile naturally. Mom went on, I preferred to settle this amicably. If the ramp is rebuilt tomorrow, we can forget the destruction of property and possible disability discrimination claims. Thompson's clipboard fell slightly. I'll have to refer to the board, of course. Mom nodded. I've taken the liberty of pulling together some information on HOA liability in such an instance. She handed Thompson a folder I hadn't realized she had prepared. The personal liability portion is interesting. Board members are not always covered under HOA insurance and discrimination actions. As Thompson stiffly made her way back to her vehicle, my phone dinged with a text from Mrs. Patel. What did you tell the dragon lady? She looks like she swallowed a lemon that evening. Neighbors started dropping by first. The Patels, then the Rodriguezes, then old Mr. Foster from over the street. Is it true? Mr. Foster asked. You're battling Thompson. We're just asking reasonable accommodation, Mom said. Unassuming, Mr. Foster leaned forward. Thompson's crew took my garden bench last year, said it wasn't an approved design. That bench was where I sat. After heart surgery, the Rodriguezes had similar tales of their basketball hoop. Mrs. Patel displayed us a notice of violation for ethnic decorative items, meaning the little Diwali lanterns on her front porch. They target anyone who is different, she whispered. Anyone who doesn't fit their perfect picture. Mom listened intently to every tale, taking notes, a pattern of selective enforcement. She muttered. My phone rang, a local number I didn't know. Hello, Jordan Moore, a woman's voice asked. This is Deborah Wilson from the HOA board. We've called an emergency meeting tomorrow. Night regarding your situation, your presence is requested. I answered the phone. The HOA wants us to come to a meeting tomorrow. Mom nodded. We'll go there. I double-checked after I hung up. Mom rolled herself to the window. Look outside, parked across the street, was a black SUV. Inside sat Janice Thompson staring straight at our house. She's watching us. I told Mom, nodded, and she's making calls later that night. I assisted Mom into bed. Are you sure about this fight? These people seem pretty determined. Mom took my hand in my career. I learned something valuable. Bullies rely on people being too scared to stand up. Every individual who remains quiet makes them stronger. As I flipped her light, she added, Tomorrow, bring your camera to the meeting. My camera, why? Because Mom said with a tiny smile, Janice Thompson is not aware of what lies ahead, but soon she is going to learn how forceful the truth was. I couldn't sleep that night. All of the creaks in the house made me question whether or not Thompson had sent someone to try to intimidate us further. At midnight, headlights cast across my bedroom wall as a car moved slowly past. Our house stopped, then moved down the street. What had Mom gotten us into? Chairs scraped on the floor as Mom wheeled into the crowded community center. Her hand shook a little, but her eyes blazed with determination. Board President Richard Hoffman interrupted mid-sentence, his mouth agape. Who invited her? Janice Thompson breathed loudly, no effort to conceal her revulsion. She smoothed her pricey blazer and wrapped her pricey pin against the table. My heart was racing as I held up my hand. We have to address the illegal removal of our wheelchair ramp. We're not there yet for public comments, Janice snarled, her voice slicing like a knife. Sit down and wait your turn like everybody else. Mom cleared her throat. The room fell silent, actually. She spoke in a voice I hadn't heard since prior to her accident, by your own bylaws, Section 4.3. ADA issues can be raised at any time during proceedings. I looked around. People whispered and shifted in their seats. A woman in the back row leaned forward. "This is none of your business," Richard said, his forced smile slipping. "We have an agenda to stick to." Mom wheeled closer, putting a thick folder on the table. "The Americans with Disabilities Act is very clear about reasonable accommodations. Removing my access ramp without notice wasn't just mean, it broke federal law." She pulled out a paper with highlighted sections. "This law protects people like me from people like you." Richard's face turned red. He leaned toward Janice, whispering something urgent in her ear. Tom Reynolds, the board treasurer who lived next door to us, suddenly looked like he might throw up. "Look," Richard adjusted his tie. "We merely uphold community standards that everyone signed on to when they came here. The ramp wasn't vetted, nothing personal." Mom smiled, not the usual warm smile, but when I saw from old pictures of her in the courtroom, the smile that made opposing counsel sweat. "Then, you won't mind taking it personally when I let you know that I filed an emergency injunction this afternoon?" She straightened her shoulders. "I'm Elaine Donovan, formerly of Donovan, and the associates fell so silent I could hear the ticking of the clock." Janice's pin dropped to the floor. "The Elaine Donovan in the Madison County accessibility case." A gray-haired gentleman in the first row whistled low. "The attorney who sued Westfield Properties for discriminating against disabled renters." Mom nodded, once her face calm but terrifying. Richard's insincere smile vanished completely. "This is not the meeting for threats. It's not a threat." Mom said, "It's a legal notice. Your actions have consequences." A woman I'd never seen before stood up from the middle row. "I've lived here 8 years and been fined 6 times for my garden gnomes. Can she help me too?" "This is an illegal clinic," Janice snapped, "and your tacky decorations have nothing to do with disabilities." 3 more people stood up, each with tales of HOA harassment. Tom Reynolds began gathering his papers, looking desperate to get out enough. Richard banged his gavel. "We're progressing. Mom didn't budge prior to your action. I have queries regarding the financial reports. Why were homeowners charged special assessments for road repairs which never took place?" Richard's face palled. "Those monies were diverted to what?" inquired a person from the back. "That's board business," Janice interjected. "Not for public consumption." Mom pulled out another piece of paper. "According to state legislation, HOA financial records can be accessed by all members. I asked for these last year but never got them." "Why is that?" Tom couldn't take it anymore. "This is ridiculous. We give our time to make this community look pretty, and all we get is complaints. Is that what you call bulldozing an accessibility ramp, volunteering?" I couldn't resist myself. Or is it bullying individuals who can't fight back? Half the room clapped. Someone cried out, "They towed my daughter's car when she was visiting her sick grandmother." Richard stood up. "This meeting is adjourned. Sit down." Richard's voice came from doorway, where Eleanor Wright, former 78-year-old principal, stood leaning against her can. "For once, we're going to hear the truth." People turned to see her. This little woman who everyone respected, 30 years educating kids to stand up to bullies. She went walking slowly to front. "Never thought I'd have to do it in my retirement." Mom wheeled over to Eleanor, whispering something which made the older woman nodded firmly. Richard and Janice exchanged panic looks. What happened next would reveal years of neighborhood secrets and lies. Richard twisted his gavel, his face flushing deep crimson. "I declared, this meeting is adjourned." His voice quivered with panic, and I said, "Sit down." Eleanor Wright's authority hushed the room in spite of her fragile demeanor. The retired school principal rapped her cane on the floor firmly. "For years, I've seen you bully this neighborhood, not tonight." Murmurs of consent ran through the group. Neighbors, who hardly communicated with one another, now exchanged resolute tangles. "My mother has something that you people need to view," I said, my voice more forceful than I anticipated. Mom wheeled to the middle of the room where everyone could observe her after they destroyed my ramp. I did some reading. She opened a thick blue folder. First, these are photocopies of 17 individual accessibility offenses in Pinterest Gardens concerning elderly and disabled residents. She circulated photos around steep entrances without railings, sidewalks obstructions caused by decorative boulders, parking spaces too small for mobility equipment. That's why my grandson ceased to visit, Mrs. Garcia yelled out his wheelchair. Couldn't navigate my walkway, and they wouldn't allow me to alter it, Mom nodded. Sympathetically, but there's something else you need to see, she brought out. Financial statements, her hand steady now. These records indicate $430,000 in landscaping fees paid over the last 3 years to a company. Hoffman Reynolds, contracting the crowd, grew silent in processing this information. That's half our yearly budget, someone whispered. Is that Mr. Patel rose to his feet, accusing Richard and Tom. That's your company, isn't it? You've been paying yourselves on our funds. Richard, lunch for the records. You had no right whatsoever to see those records. This is defamation. It's public information. Mom replied, her voice cold, as death filed with the state business registry. Just like the 3 lawsuits against your company for substandard work that was never completed. Tom Reynolds knocked over his chair as he stood. This is ridiculous. We've improved property values by 20% since taking over by forcing out anyone who couldn't afford your special assessments. Eleanor added, like the Martinez family who had lived here for 30 years. I noticed Mom glancing toward the back door. She positioned herself perfectly. Tom lunged toward her wheelchair, reaching for the papers. Give me those flash, flash, flash. Everyone turned towards the abrupt flash of light. A woman emerged from the darkness at the door. Professional camera in hand, Andrea Lopez, Metro Daily News. She said, notebook now in hand. Mr. Reynolds, would you care to say something about why you just tried to physically threaten a disabled resident? Tom froze in mid-reach, mouth agape. How did you? Who told? Richard sputtered. I think I have everything I need for tomorrow's front page. Andrea went on reading her photos. HOA board members caught redirecting resident funds to own firms. Sounds like a ring to it. Mom smiled, Andrea, and I have known her a long time. She handled a lot of my cases. This is private property. Janice had finally found her voice. Press isn't permitted. Actually, Eleanor interrupted, as a dues-paying member, I invited her as my guest. Our bylaws allow each member 1 guest at meetings. Mrs. Garcia stood unsteadily. Is that why my roof repair request was denied 3 times? So you could pocket the money instead? Others joined in, voices rising with years of frustration. They fined me $500 for planting vegetables, made me tear down my son's basketball hoop, threatened to put a lien on my house over Christmas lights. Richard tried banging his gavel again, but nobody paid attention. You can't prove anything, he hissed at Mom. It's all circumstantial. Mom pulled out one final document. Except for this email chain between you and Janice about how to make violations in order to fund your lake house repairs. Tom's face turned from red to white. Where did you get that? You sent it to the whole board last month, Mom said, including Mrs. Blumenthal, who was quite worried. An elderly lady waved hesitantly from the corner. I didn't know what it meant until now. Richard picked up his briefcase. This meeting is over. We'll be talking through our lawyers. The room erupted as residents came forward with questions. Mom was flanked by neighbors telling tales of HOA abuse. Mr. Patel was already making plans for an emergency vote to oust the board. Andrea kept snapping pictures. I went out for some fresh air. The evenings of Vince overwhelming me. My phone rang with a text from an unknown number. You'll regret this, as residents emerged from the meeting hall, pumped up and talking animatedly. I spotted Janice wasn't among them. Her silver Mercedes was already disappeared from the parking lot. A shiver ran down my spine when I became aware she had slipped away. Incognito. Nobody had an idea where she had vanished or what she could do next. I took Mom home, both of us triumphant, only to discover catastrophe. Water gushed forth beneath our front door, inundating the entryway inside. Every sink and tub had been turned on full bore, creating water damage all over the house. Our security camera indicated Janice and 2 men coming in with what seemed to be a maintenance key. They're desperate, Mom said, oddly calm. This is what people do when they're cornered. While I called the police, Mom got an anonymous text. Drop it or worse will come. Officer Kent took our statement but seemed reluctant. HOA disputes are typically civil issues. This is breaking and damaging vandalism and maybe hate crime territory. Mom clarified, pointing to the ADA aspect after the police departed. Neighbors started showing up. Eleanor. The Patels, even reticent Mrs. Gonzalez, offering assistance with the cleanup. They brought fans, towels, and resolve. We're sick of living in fear. Eleanor clarified, wringing out a mop. Your mother, standing up, gave us courage. The water had permeated through our photo albums, decades worth of memories. Ruined. Mom's face fell as she attempted to rescue photos from her law career. I hadn't seen her look so defeated since her accident. Maybe we should simply move, I whispered, assisting her dry a picture of her accepting an award. Mom's eyes lit up with the old spark. That's what they're looking for. They've pushed everyone else around into compliance, not us. My phone rang with text messages from neighbors I hardly knew. Word had spread quickly. Mr. Davis from 3 streets away. Broad industrial fans. The Morales family brought dinner. Miss Jackson, whom I only knew from neighborhood walks, arrived with dehumidifiers. Janice quoted me last month for my grandson's basketball hoop. Miss Jackson said it was an unsightly recreational facility. After 10 years of complaints, never. As we worked into the night, headlights illuminated our windows. A black SUV parked across the street. Nobody got out. It just sat there staring at. Mom saw my anxious glance. Document everything, she said quietly. Photograph the car. Note. The time around midnight. Most neighbors had gone home, leaving us with humming fans and wet carpets. Mom's bedroom was the hardest hit. Her medical equipment had gotten wet. I helped move her to the living room couch for the night. Remember when I represented that housing discrimination case in Millfield? She asked, getting her blankets. The developer slashed my tires, had people tail me. But when bullies get afraid, they make errors. I couldn't sleep. So I began researching the HOA financial records. Mom had discovered, revealed a pattern. Properties receiving violations were frequently purchased at discounted prices months afterward by a shell corporation. When I cross-checked ownership records, a recognizable name came up: Janice's husband. A gentle tap at the door made me jump through the peephole. I could see Tom Reynolds glancing anxiously over his shoulder. I shouldn't be here, he whispered when I opened the door. But I can't be a part of this anymore. Janice maintains a set of books. The real money isn't in the landscaping contracts, it's the property flipping. He gave me a flash drive. Richard doesn't know I copied these. They're doing something bigger for your mother. Be careful. As Tom evaporated into the shadows. The black SUV's engine revved. Tom ran faster as the car accelerated towards him. I yelled a warning, but it was too late. The SUV veered at the last second, just missing him, then sped away. Mom wheeled herself to the door, face pale in moonlight. What occurred? I stood by the flash drive, shaking hands. I believe we just acquired the key to toppling the whole HO board. But neither of us saw the little blinking unit that had been stuck beneath our mailbox, watching, listening, sending everything back to whomever was in that black SUV. At dawn, sirens, police cars encircled Richard Hoffman's home, located across the lake from our porch. Neighbors formed a crowd, watching officers leading Richard out in handcuffs, still wearing pajamas. Tom Reynolds followed minutes later. But their arrest brought me no joy, only worry about what they might do in desperation. The financial fraud was bigger than we thought, Detective Santos explained when she visited us later. Your information led to frozen accounts and search warrants, but we still haven't located Janice Thompson, Mom's phone. Rang Andrea from the newspaper, the story's hitting. Now, she said online, first front page tomorrow. You may wish to ready yourself for scrutiny in less than an hour. News vans lined our street. Neighbors spoke to the press about decades of HOA harassment. Mom appeared on the local noon report, explaining patiently how accessibility rights aren't special privileges, but basic dignity. My phone rang with a text message from an unknown number. Check your garage, heart racing. I discovered a manila envelope taped on our garage door. Inside were pictures of me at work, of Mom at physical therapy, of us through our windows, and a final picture of our house with a red X marked through it. I showed Detective Santos, who had an officer assigned to monitor our house. Classic intimidation. She said someone's desperate mom got calls from old colleagues offering legal assistance. By afternoon, 3 lawyers had stepped forward to assist neighbors in filing a class action lawsuit against the HOA. People started bringing records, years of dubious violations, selective enforcement records, proof of property devaluation schemes. They would fine elderly homeowners with minor infractions, Mr. Patel described, pointing to years of steadily more absurd citations. Ultimately, many sold in a loss. Just to put an end to the harassment as night descended, neighbors congregated in our living room. Now in impromptu headquarters, Eleanor made coffee while Mrs. Gonzalez sorted documents into piles. The neighborhood that had endured in quiet terror for years was discovering its voice. A jarring crash ended our gathering, a brick through our front window with a note. Back off or burn. Rather than fighting off people, the threat brought us together. 2 neighbors slept over as watchmen. Others put up security cameras with faces fearing our street. Solidarity came in friendship. Morning brought a surprise piece of news. Janice had attempted to board a plane to Mexico using fake credentials and $50,000 cash. Her telephone records indicated calls to the black SUV owner, a private detective with a criminal background. The HOA emergency board, that had been restructured temporarily, headed unanimously by Eleanor, voted to pay for the repairs to our house and add a proper wheelchair ramp. Contractors came that afternoon, working fast as more of the neighbors came by with food and to help me. I keep thinking of all the people who had moved away before they could see this day, Mom said. Observing the community come together, the elderly couple who couldn't maintain lawn standards, the single mom sided with children's toys. Mr. Davis overheard her. We're making a contact list trying to reach all those who departed due to HOA harassment. They have earned the right to know what occurred. 2 weeks later, we had a ramp warming party. Neighbors invaded our yard, partying not only Mom's new access, but their liberation from tyranny. The police investigation had uncovered more than $2 million in fraudulent contracts and property schemes. Richard, Tom, and Janice were seriously charged as night fell. Mom spoke to everyone from her new ramp when they removed my access. They believed they were dealing with a disabled woman. They might bully. They didn't know they were bullying a community willing to stand as one. I saw a car slow down across the street, Andrea of the newspaper. She stepped out with an older man who looked around with tears in his eyes. This is Frank Cooper. She introduced him. He used to live in your house before the HOA harassment made him sell. Mom wheeled over to welcome him. Would you like to walk up the ramp? She asked, holding out her hand as Frank ascended the steps that had for years been taken from him. Neighbors cheered at fighting for our rights. We'd helped heal wounds we hadn't even known were there. The headline in that month's community newsletter was, Simply Pinecrest Gardens, a community restored. But the best story was in the faces of people no longer living in fear, and in the small wooden plaque we installed alongside Mom's ramp.